lyric that the men are singing No Day But Today and the women are singing I Die Without You.
Right.
And that both things are true.
Yep.
And they don't cancel each other out.
Jonathan Larson passed away on the first preview of the show, but not on Broadway.
Right. We were doing it at New York Theater Workshop.
Okay.
He was alive for the dress rehearsal.
Right.
The invited dress rehearsal. Our mutual friend, John Benjamin Hickey. I'll never forget his reaction after the show. He ran up to me and he went, "You guys are all fucking incredible. I wanted to fuck each and every one of you."
That's the highest praise.
I know.
What higher praise is there? Especially from John Benjamin Hickey. Wow.
Yeah, no, Jonathan was very much alive for the dress rehearsal. I mean, it was an amazing... I mean, I've been a part of some really... 6 Degrees of Separation was a big deal.
Yep.
I had a small part in it.
Yes,
It was a very big deal. But I can remember the dress rehearsal for 6 Degrees of Separation. We were playing the Mitzi Newhouse, which in Lincoln Center is this small theater downstairs, and the Beaumont is the Broadway theater upstairs, which was playing Some Americans Abroad, which is a pretty quiet play.
Right.
The laughter and cheering from 6 Degrees of Separation went through the ceiling so that the actors on stage of Some Americans Abroad were hearing it. It was that electric. So that was my closest sort of touchstone, and then 6 Degrees went on to be this huge success. The Rent dress rehearsal was like that. And Jonathan was surrounded by people afterwards, and it wasn't just his friends, I promise you. It was like,
he had it, though. He got to experience that.
So people glommed on him, wanted to talk to him. My agent, tears in her eyes, shaking, so that happened. And the New York Times had sent Anthony Tomasini. He was I don't know what his job is currently still, but he was writing for the classical music stuff. And it was the 100th anniversary of La Boheme.
Right, so perfect.
Coincided.
A perfect story.
So he's like, "Oh, I should go check out this East Village adaptation." So he just happened to be there. He wasn't reviewing it, just to have included in his piece.
Mm-hmm.
He was so struck by what he'd seen that he asked Jonathan to sit for an on-the-spot interview. So, Jonathan, 35 years old, had been plugging away. Nothing had happened and was on the verge. And he knew, one of the things, it's been the 20th anniversary this year. And so, like, his old friend Victoria Leacock has been sharing some stories. And the other day she posted something about Facebook because people were talking about, like, the different perceptions of how much can we know how much he did know or didn't know of what was to come. And she was like, no, absolutely, he knew that he had a hit. Again, you never know for sure, but he was so confident. I mean, that brings me some comfort. So the last time I saw him was through the box office window, which was the only quiet place in the little New York Theater Workshop play. That was the only place to go, was where he was doing his interview with Anthony Tomasini. He knew enough about everything to know that an interview with the New York Times was a big deal. So I saw him, and of course I was going to see him the next day. And then he went home afterwards, and he put on a kettle on the stove to make some tea, and he dropped dead on his kitchen floor. And his roommate came home in the middle of the night and found him. That's when it happened. It was before the first official preview off-Broadway.
So how long after you did Rent off-Broadway did you guys move to Broadway?
Very quickly.
And was everyone in the cast really friends and family in the way that the public perceived it?
Yes. No, absolutely, and especially after Jonathan died. And we already were we were getting along great anyway, and we loved the piece, and we were having an incredible time. And then when he died, it just fused us together. And I suppose, in times of crisis, people can either splinter apart or come together, and we came together. We were just lucky in a way, looking back, that it was the piece that it was because it helped us.
Yeah.
Because the piece is about living in the face of tragedy, living in the face of loss, living in the face of crisis.
So was there a point where you, as a performer, were able to let go of the tragedy surrounding the show and just do the show?
In the middle of all of that, it was so intense. Plus, I was going through the illness of my mother and her last year on Earth while I was doing all this. So, I mean, it was just like I was exhausted. And so when I was able to come back to the show, it was much more simply about telling the story.
Right.
And there was something that was very refreshing about that, honestly.
Yeah.
And I had more in reserve then. Wasn't so wrecked by it.
Was Charlie Brown, was that character the next character you played after Mark Cohen?
Yeah, so I did the run in New York, and then part of how I decided when I wanted to leave the run in New York, because I didn't want to leave for any stupid reason.
Really, forever, right?
Special.
I mean, why would you?
As exhausting as it was still. But we found out that there was going to be a London production, and I wanted to go to London and take that opportunity. So I worked backwards and said I want to take a little time off between to have a break, replenish my brain and body a little bit, and then did it in London for 6 months of run, 7 months including rehearsal. And while I was in London is when I got the call to audition for Charlie Brown, so I made a video from London and got cast. So going back to having done Charlie Brown when I was a kid, part of what was so hard of walking away from Rent for me too was that it was the last thing my mom saw me do. She was well enough to come to opening night on Broadway, which was extraordinary. So the thought of doing the first thing I was going to do with that she wasn't going to be able to witness was very strange for me to think about. And the fact that it was Charlie Brown, which was something that and it wasn't the same part, but it was another piece that she had a connection to.
Yeah, there's poetry, great poetry in that.
And also just that it was something so much less intense was very, very, very appealing, sort of gentler.
Totally. I had never done a musical before, but for me, it was a very special moment in time. And I think the song Seasons of Love will remain a song that people think of when they think of musical theater songs that really resonate. And I think Happiness is truly an extraordinary song that penetrates everyone's heart. Happiness
is finding a pencil. And then pizza with sausage? No, because there's different versions. Yeah, I have to. That's the other reason that whenever I put it in my set, I have to review the lyrics because there's different versions of it too. Our version was slightly different.
So there's the explicit lyric one that you can't do in certain concerts, and then there's the kind of more family friendly one, which has sausage and sharing a sandwich.
Yes,
B.D. Wong still gives me crap. I'm sorry, but he likes to say that I'm the one who's pitchy during that particular harmony, but. I don't know. I've listened to it. I think maybe he is.
Well,
There's the Pitch Wars. Do you know?
Yes.
Do you know that new reality show?
I do sign Charlie Brown stuff fairly often over the years, at stage doors and stuff. People have.
I know. I have people tell me how much their mother loved it, and I'm just thrilled every time. It was my mother's favorite show. I'm like, you're 20. Okay. Can you talk a little about Broadway Con?
Sure.
And what's happening with that?
This year was the first Broadway Con, and I started just reaching out to friends. I was in If Then at the time, so some of the first people I talked to were like Jen Colella, who was in the show with me, and Tamika Lawrence, who was in the show with me, and LaShawn, who was in the show with me, and said, we're putting this together. I promise it's going to be really good. Will you join us? Like, of course, sure.
Yeah. So what's next for you? You're going back to If Then.
Adam, Pascal, and I have several concerts.
It's called Acoustically Speaking. Right?
Is that I don't even know.
That's what they're calling it.
Things keep changing.
Acoustically Speaking, a 20-year friendship will be presented at different intimate venues. Does that sound fair?
Sure.
I want to come watch an intimate friendship be revealed on stage.
Sure.
I could really talk to you for the next 5 years, but that can't happen today.
Can't.
But I hope you will come back.
Anytime.
And it's just thrilling to get to kind of catch up with you and hear about all the amazing things you're doing. And thank you for sharing it with us. And you're a singular talent. And I feel really privileged to live on the planet at the same time as you, Anthony Rapp. So thank you for being here.
Clouds can make the wind blow. Bugs can make the grass grow. So there you go. These are little known facts that now you know.
Hey, I'm Alana Levine. Thank you for listening. Please don't forget to rate and review our show in the iTunes show page. Little Known Facts is recorded at the Hangar Studios in New York City.